The stars looked different now that they were dying. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human dreadnought HMS Defiance and watched another star system go dark on the tactical display. The Devourers had consumed everything in the Rigel sector in less than 6 hours. 3 billion lives gone like smoke. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and turned to his communications officer. Lieutenant Amy Chen was young, maybe 25, but she had steady hands and never panicked when the shooting started. Right now her face was pale as she listened to the emergency broadcast from the outer colonies. "Sir, we're getting reports from 7 more systems," Amy said quietly. "The Devourers are moving faster than our projections. They're not following any pattern we understand." Jake nodded grimly. The war had been going badly for months. The Galactic Defense Coalition was losing ground every day to the parasitic aliens that came from the empty space between galaxies. The Devourers were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. They didn't want territory or resources in any way that made sense. They simply consumed everything living and moved on, leaving behind dead worlds that would never support life again. Humanity had joined the coalition nearly 200 years ago, grateful to find allies among the stars. The reptilian Sauroch Empire had welcomed human warriors with their aggressive tactics and innovative weapons. The Crystalline Vex Collective appreciated human creativity and adaptability. Together, the 3 species had built a civilization that spanned thousands of worlds, now that civilization was crumbling. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Carter," Amy announced. The main screen flickered to life, showing the weathered face of Admiral Ben Carter, commander of the human fleet. Behind him, Jake could see the bridge of the flagship HMS Retribution, busy with activity as officers coordinated the defense of Earth's colonies. "Jake, we need to talk," Carter said without preamble. "How soon can you reach the Kepler station?" 18 hours at maximum burn, Jake replied. "What's the situation?" Carter's expression darkened. "The Devourers are making a push for the core systems. If they take Kepler station, they'll have a clear path to Earth itself. We're assembling every ship we have for a final stand." Jake felt his stomach tighten. Kepler station was a massive orbital facility that served as a supply depot and refueling stop for coalition forces. It was also heavily defended, with enough firepower to hold off a small fleet. If the Devourers were targeting it directly, they must be preparing something big. "What about our allies?" Jake asked. "Admiral Thesser is bringing the Sauroch 3rd Fleet and Coordinator Prime 7 Alpha has promised Vex support," Carter said. "We're going to hit them with everything we have. I'm transmitting the battle plan now." The tactical display updated with fleet positions and attack vectors. Jake studied the information carefully. It was ambitious, requiring precise coordination between 3 very different types of warships and fighting styles. The humans would provide the main assault force, using their heavy weapons and aggressive tactics to punch through Devourer defenses. The Sauroch would use their speed and stealth capabilities to attack from the flanks, while the Vex would coordinate everything through their quantum communication network. "There's something else," Carter continued, his voice dropping lower. "Our science teams have developed a new weapon, quantum torpedoes that can disrupt the dimensional anchors the Devourers use to stay in our reality. We think we can collapse their entire mothership if we can get close enough." Jake raised an eyebrow. "How close?" "Close enough to touch," Carter admitted. "It's a suicide mission, Jake. We'll need volunteers." The bridge fell silent. Jake looked around at his crew, seeing the same determination in their faces that he felt in his own heart. They had all lost friends and family to the Devourers. They had all seen what happened to worlds that fell to the alien swarm. "You'll have your volunteers," Jake said firmly. "I knew you'd say that," Carter replied with a sad smile. "Jake, I'm sharing the quantum torpedo specifications with Admiral Thesar and Prime 7 Alpha. We need perfect coordination for this to work. The moment we fire those torpedoes, every ship in the fleet needs to be in exactly the right position." Jake nodded. It made sense to share the technical data with their allies. The Sauroch and Vex had been fighting alongside humanity for decades. They had proven their loyalty in dozens of battles. Without their support, the human fleet would never survive long enough to use the new weapons. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. Jake's crew worked around the clock to prepare the HMS Defiance for what might be their final battle. Chief Engineer Tony Blake pushed the engines beyond their safety limits to squeeze out every possible bit of speed. Dr. Karen White, the ship's science officer, worked with her team to understand how the quantum torpedoes would interact with Devourer technology. When they finally reached Kepler Station, Jake was amazed by the size of the assembled fleet. Nearly 400 ships filled the space around the station, representing the largest military force the Coalition had ever assembled. The human ships formed the center of the formation, their angular hulls bristling with weapons. The Sorok vessels moved like predators through the darkness, their sleek forms designed for speed and stealth. The Vex ships were the most alien of all, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them as they moved. Admiral Thessar appeared on the communications screen, his reptilian features showing the strain of command. The Sorok had been fighting the Devourers longer than anyone, and it showed in the Admiral's scarred hide and missing eye. "Human Morrison," Thessar said in his hissing accent, "your species has shown great courage in this war. Today we fight together as brothers." Prime 7 Alpha's image flickered into view beside the Sorok Admiral. The Vex coordinator was a towering crystal being whose thoughts moved at the speed of light through quantum connections to the collective consciousness of his people. "The probability matrices favor success if we maintain perfect coordination," Prime 7 Alpha stated in his musical voice. "The quantum torpedo specifications have been integrated into our tactical systems." Jake felt a surge of confidence. With allies like these, humanity could face anything the universe threw at them. The three species had different strengths, but together they were unstoppable. The Devourer fleet emerged from the void like a nightmare made real. Thousands of organic ships, each one a living creature the size of a city, moved toward Kepler Station with hungry purpose. At their center was the mothership, a creature so vast that it blocked out the stars behind it. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter," came the transmission across all Coalition frequencies. "Today we make our stand. Today we show these parasites that the galaxy belongs to the living. All ships advance." The battle began with a thunderous exchange of energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. Human ships charged forward with their guns blazing, while Sorok vessels darted between the enemy formations like deadly shadows. Vex ships wove through the chaos, their weapons creating impossible geometries of destruction. Jake watched the tactical display as the plan unfolded exactly as designed. The Coalition forces were taking heavy losses, but they were pushing through the Devourer defenses toward the massive mothership. Soon they would be in position to fire the quantum torpedoes and end this war once and for all. Then everything changed. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the Sorok and Vex fleets," Amy reported, her voice tight with confusion. "They're powering down their weapons." Jake stared at the display in disbelief. The alien ships were breaking formation, pulling back from the battle just as the human forces reached their most vulnerable position. The HMS Defiance and her sister ships found themselves alone, surrounded by thousands of Devourer vessels with no support. "Admiral Thessar, what are you doing?" Jake demanded over the communications channel. The Sorok Admiral's image appeared on screen, but his expression had changed completely. Gone was the brotherhood and shared purpose. In its place was something cold and calculating. "I am sorry, Human Morrison," Thessar said with what might have been genuine regret. "My people have made an arrangement with the Devourers. Your species is the price of our survival." The truth hit Jake like a physical blow. The betrayal was complete and devastating. Humanity's allies had negotiated a separate peace with the enemy, offering human space and human lives as tribute to save themselves. The quantum torpedo specifications they had shared were probably already in enemy hands. As Devourer ships closed in from all sides, Jake Morrison realized that everything had changed in that single moment. The age of cooperation and trust was over. From now on, humanity would stand alone among the stars. But they would not go quietly into the night. 6 months after the betrayal at Kepler Station, Earth looked like a fortress preparing for siege. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood in the command center deep beneath New Geneva, watching status reports flow across dozens of screens. The underground facility had been carved from solid rock and shielded against every form of detection the aliens possessed. It was one of many hidden bases that humanity had built in the months since learning that trust was a luxury they could no longer afford. "Admiral, we have confirmation from the Luna shipyards," reported Colonel Rick Stone as he entered the command center. The general was a big man with scars on his face from the evacuation of Kepler Station. He had personally led the rescue shuttles that saved what few human survivors escaped the alien betrayal. "Production is ahead of schedule. We'll have 12 new frigates ready for deployment by next month. Lisa nodded grimly. The shipyards on Luna had been working around the clock since President Amy Walsh declared the end of all treaties with the Sarok Empire and Vex Collective. Every human facility in the solar system had been converted to military production. Factories that once made civilian goods now produced weapons and armor. Research stations that studied peaceful applications of alien technology now focused on ways to kill their former allies. Any word from Commander Parker? Lisa asked. Rick's expression darkened. Steve's still deep in Sarok space. His last transmission was 3 days ago. He's gotten closer to their core systems than any human since the betrayal. Commander Steve Parker was one of their best intelligence officers, a man who could blend into alien society with frightening ease. Before the war, he had served as a liaison officer with Sarok forces, learning their language and customs. Now he used that knowledge to spy on the creatures who had sold humanity to their enemies. The door to the command center opened again, and Dr. Elena Rodriguez entered carrying a data pad. The xenobiologist looked exhausted, her usually neat brown hair messy from long hours in the laboratory. She had been working without rest since returning from a fact-finding mission to the outer colonies, and what she had discovered was changing everything humanity thought they knew about their former allies. Admiral, I have the final analysis of the Sarok communication intercepts, Elena said, her voice tight with controlled anger. It's worse than we thought. Lisa gestured for her to continue. In the months since the betrayal, they had learned many uncomfortable truths about their former allies. But each new revelation seemed to cut deeper than the last. The Sarok didn't just abandon us at Kepler Station, Elena continued, her hand shaking slightly as she accessed the data pad. They've been working against us for at least 2 years. We found evidence that they were feeding information about human defensive positions directly to the Devourers during the war. Rick Stone cursed under his breath. You're saying they helped the enemy target our colonies? That's exactly what I'm saying, Elena replied. The attack patterns, the timing, the way the Devourers always seemed to know where our weakest points were. It wasn't superior alien intelligence. It was betrayal from the very beginning. Lisa felt a cold fury building in her chest. She had lost friends and colleagues in those attacks. Good people who died believing they were fighting alongside trusted allies. The knowledge that the Sarok had been orchestrating their deaths made the betrayal even more personal. What about the Vex? Lisa asked. Elena's expression grew even grimmer. They were more subtle, but just as guilty. We found traces of Vex quantum signatures in the communication networks of human colonies that fell to Devourer attacks. They weren't just sharing tactical information. They were actively disrupting our defenses from within. The command center fell silent as the full scope of the alien conspiracy became clear. Humanity hadn't just been betrayed at the moment of their greatest need. They had been systematically weakened and set up for destruction over the course of years. Their allies had been their enemies all along, and humanity had never suspected until it was almost too late. Ma'am, incoming priority transmission from Commander Parker, announced Lieutenant Amy Chen from her communication station. Amy had been transferred to Earth after surviving the massacre at Kepler Station, and she had thrown herself into the work of coordinating human resistance efforts across the galaxy. Steve Parker's image appeared on the main screen, but the quality was poor and filled with static. He was transmitting from deep within Sarok space, using stolen alien communication equipment to avoid detection. His face was gaunt and his hair had been dyed to match Sarok coloring, part of his disguise as an alien traitor. Command, I have urgent intelligence, Steve said, his voice barely audible through the interference. The Sarok have been reverse engineering our quantum torpedo technology. They're planning to sell the designs to other galactic powers while claiming that humanity is extinct. Lisa leaned forward in her chair. How long do we have? Days, maybe hours, Steve replied. They're presenting the technology as their own innovation to a consortium of alien governments. Once the sale goes through, human weapons technology will be spread across the galaxy and everyone will believe we're dead. Rick Stone slammed his fist on the nearest console. They're not just trying to wipe us out. They're stealing our legacy and profiting from it. There's more, Steve continued. I've identified the location of the Sarok genetic repository. It's on their homeworld, heavily guarded but not impossible to reach. If something were to happen to that facility, their entire species would face extinction within a generation. Lisa felt something cold and calculating settle into her mind. The Sarok had made a fatal error in their betrayal of humanity. They had underestimated human resourcefulness and determination. More importantly, they had revealed their own critical weaknesses while believing that no human would survive to exploit them. "Steve, get out of there," Lisa ordered. "We have enough information." "Understood, Admiral," Steve replied before the transmission cut out. Lisa turned to address the room full of officers and scientists. These were the survivors, the ones who had escaped the alien trap and lived to see their species written off as extinct. But humanity was far from dead, and their former allies were about to learn what humans were truly capable of when pushed to the edge. "Dr. Rodriguez, I want a complete analysis of every alien weakness we've discovered," Lisa said. "Biological, technological, social, economic, everything." Elena nodded eagerly. "I've already begun the work. The Sarok dependency on their homeworld for genetic material is just the beginning. The Vex collective consciousness has vulnerabilities too. Their quantum network can be disrupted if you know the right frequencies." "Colonel Stone, begin recruiting operations," Lisa continued. "Every human civilian in alien space, every trader, engineer, scientist, and worker. I want them all brought into our intelligence network." Rick grinned fiercely. "Already in progress, ma'am. Turns out humans scattered across the galaxy are very interested in revenge against the species that tried to exterminate them." Lisa walked over to the tactical display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked Devourer-controlled territory, while blue and green areas showed Sarok and Vex holdings respectively. Human space was marked in gray, officially listed as consumed in all alien databases. But Lisa was looking at the display differently now. She wasn't seeing enemy territory. She was seeing future human holdings, resources that would soon belong to Earth and its colonies. The aliens had made one critical mistake in their betrayal. They had taught humanity that mercy was weakness and trust was foolishness. "President Walsh is authorizing a new operation," Lisa announced. "We're not going to fight a war of survival. We're going to fight a war of acquisition. By the time we're finished, everything they own will belong to us." Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her data pad. "Admiral, what about the moral implications? If we do this, we'll be no better than them." Lisa considered the question carefully. Before the betrayal, she might have agreed. Human values had always emphasized cooperation, fairness, and the protection of innocent life. But the aliens had shown that such values were seen as weakness by the rest of the galaxy. "Doctor, they tried to genocide our entire species for their own convenience," Lisa said quietly. "They sold our children to monsters and then tried to steal credit for our innovations. I think we can set aside moral concerns until every human who died because of their betrayal has been avenged." The room fell silent again. But this time it was the silence of people who had found their purpose. Humanity would no longer be the naive junior partner in galactic civilization. They would no longer trust aliens who smiled while planning humanity's destruction. The age of human mercy was over. The age of human dominance was about to begin. Outside the command center, work crews continued their preparations. In hidden factories across the solar system, new ships took shape. In secret laboratories, scientists worked on technologies that would make alien defenses obsolete. In the depths of space, human agents moved through alien society like ghosts, gathering information and preparing for the day when humanity would collect what was owed to them. The aliens thought they had won by betraying humanity at their moment of greatest vulnerability. They had no idea that their victory would be their greatest defeat. Humans learned free. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the cargo bay of his new flagship, watching the crew load captured Sarok equipment onto human transports. The stealth ship HMS Ghost was nothing like the vessels humanity had built before the betrayal. Its hull was made from salvaged Devourer chitin that bent light around it, while its engines used modified Vex quantum crystals that left no energy signature. It was a ship built from the corpses of humanity's enemies, and it was perfect for the work ahead. "That's the last of the mining equipment from the Rigel facility," reported Captain Sarah Brooks as she approached Morrison. Sarah had been promoted after leading a successful raid on a Sarok supply depot, bringing back enough raw materials to build 3 new ships. Her face was hard now, marked by months of fighting in the shadows against former allies who thought humanity was extinct. Morrison nodded as he watched the final containers disappear into the transport ships. Operation Ghost Storm had been running for 8 months, and every raid brought them closer to their ultimate goal. The Sorok and Vex still had no idea that humanity survived the Kepler Station massacre. They believed the scattered attacks on their outer territories were the work of pirates or devourer remnants. "Any casualties?" Morrison asked. "None on our side," Sarah replied with satisfaction. "The Sorok defenders never saw us coming. We were in and out in 20 minutes just like the previous raids." Morrison smiled grimly. The stealth technology developed by engineer Tony Blake had made them ghosts in space, capable of striking anywhere without warning. Combined with the enhanced AI systems that Dr. Karen White had created, human ships could outthink and outmaneuver alien vessels that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. "Sir, incoming transmission from Earth Command," announced Lieutenant Pete Davis from the communications station. Pete was young but reliable, one of the new generation of officers who had learned to fight without mercy or hesitation. Admiral Lisa Hayes appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from the hidden command center beneath New Geneva. Behind her, Morrison could see the busy activity of a war machine that never slept. Earth had become the heart of a growing human empire built on secrecy and revenge. "Jake, we have a problem," Lisa said without preamble. "Commander Parker's intelligence network has intercepted Sorok communications. They're starting to suspect something." Morrison frowned. "What kind of suspicions?" "They think the attacks might be coordinated," Lisa replied. "Admiral Thessar has called for increased security around their core facilities. More importantly, they're beginning to investigate the possibility that some humans might have survived." Sarah Brooks stepped into view of the camera. "How much time do we have before they figure it out?" "Maybe days, maybe weeks," Lisa said. "But Jake, there's something else. We've confirmed the location of both species' critical vulnerabilities. Dr. Rodriguez has completed her analysis." The screen split to show Dr. Elena Rodriguez in her laboratory. The xenobiologist looked tired but triumphant as she held up a datapad containing months of research. "The Sorok genetic repository is exactly where Commander Parker reported," Elena said. "One facility on their homeworld that contains the genetic templates for their entire species. Without it, they can't reproduce. But there's more. The Vex collective consciousness depends on quantum resonance crystals located in 7 core systems. If those crystals are destroyed or disrupted, their shared consciousness will collapse." Morrison felt a surge of dark satisfaction. The aliens who had betrayed humanity had built their civilizations around single points of failure. It was the kind of overconfidence that came from millennia of safety and superiority. They had never imagined that anyone would dare to strike at their foundations. "What about defenses?" Sarah asked. "Heavy but not impossible," Elena replied. "The Sorok homeworld is protected by their most advanced fleet, but our stealth technology should allow us to slip past their sensors. The Vex core systems are more challenging. Their quantum crystals are buried deep underground and protected by automated defense systems." Lisa Hayes leaned forward in her chair. "Jake, President Walsh has authorized the final phase of our operation. It's time to show the galaxy that humanity is not only alive but ready to take what belongs to us." Morrison understood immediately. Operation Ghost Storm had been preparation, a way to gather resources and intelligence while testing their new capabilities. Now it was time for the real work to begin, the systematic acquisition of everything their former allies owned. "What's the timeline?" Morrison asked. "Simultaneous strikes across the galaxy," Lisa replied. "We hit their most important facilities at the same time, before they can coordinate a response. Commander Parker's network of human civilians will provide intelligence and support from within alien society." Sarah Brooks grinned fiercely. "It's about time. I'm tired of hitting mining operations and supply depots. Let's go after something that matters." Morrison shared her enthusiasm. For too long they had been forced to strike at the edges of alien civilization, taking what they could while avoiding direct confrontation. But humans had never been good at avoiding fights, especially when they had been betrayed and left for dead. "There's one more thing," Elena added, her expression growing serious. "Our analysis shows that both species have become completely dependent on automated systems and artificial intelligence to run their civilizations. They've grown soft during centuries of peace and prosperity." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Soft how?" "They can't function without their technology," Elena explained. "The Sorok military relies entirely on computer-controlled targeting systems and navigation. The Vex collective consciousness has made individual decision-making almost impossible for most of their population. If we can disrupt their technology, they'll be helpless. The implications were staggering. Morrison had always assumed that conquering alien civilizations would require massive fleets and years of warfare. But if Elena was right, it might be possible to bring down entire species through carefully targeted strikes at their technological infrastructure. Dr. White has developed computer viruses specifically designed to target alien systems, Lisa continued. Once we establish control over their networks, we can shut down their defenses, their communications, their life support systems, everything. Sarah Brooks looked thoughtful. We're not just talking about revenge anymore. We're talking about complete conquest. Morrison nodded slowly. The scope of what they were planning was breathtaking in its ambition. They weren't just going to punish their former allies for their betrayal. They were going to replace them entirely as the dominant power in the galaxy. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from one of our deep cover agents, Pete Davis announced from his station. The screen changed to show the face of Frank Miller, a human businessman who had been operating in Sorok space for years before the betrayal. Frank had used his knowledge of alien markets to build a network of companies that were slowly gaining control of critical supply chains. Admiral, the situation is accelerating, Frank said urgently. The Sorok are starting to ask questions about human-manufactured components in their military systems. We need to move now before they discover how deeply we've penetrated their infrastructure. Morrison felt his heart rate increase. The moment of truth was approaching faster than anyone had expected. But perhaps that was for the best. Humans had always performed better under pressure, and they had learned to turn disadvantages into opportunities. Frank, how much of their military use is human-made components? Morrison asked. About 60%, Frank replied with a grim smile. Turns out human engineering is more reliable than anything they can make themselves. Their ships, their weapons, their communication systems, all of it depends on technology we've been quietly selling them through shell companies. Sarah Brooks laughed harshly. They're using our own technology to hunt for survivors of the species they tried to exterminate. Morrison felt the irony of the situation settle into his bones. The aliens who had betrayed humanity were now dependent on human innovation for their very survival. They had become so accustomed to human reliability and excellence that they couldn't function without it. Admiral Hayes, we need to accelerate our timeline, Morrison said. If they discover the extent of our infiltration, they might be able to remove human technology from their systems before we can use it against them. Lisa nodded grimly. Agreed. All units are to begin final preparations immediately. Jake, you'll lead the strike on the Sorok homeworld. Sarah, I want you to coordinate the attacks on Vex core systems. Morrison felt the familiar thrill of combat preparation flowing through his veins. After months of careful planning and shadow warfare, it was time for humanity to step back into the light. But when they emerged from the darkness, they would not be the naive junior partners who had trusted alien promises of friendship. They would be the masters of everything their enemies once owned. The age of human dominance was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Sorok homeworld of Thessarian Prime had never been attacked in over 3,000 years of galactic history. Its massive orbital defense platforms bristled with weapons that could destroy entire fleets, while patrol ships moved through the system in carefully coordinated patterns that left no gaps in coverage. Admiral Thessar himself commanded the defenses from his flagship, confident that his world was the most secure location in the galaxy. He had no idea that Admiral Jake Morrison's stealth fleet was already inside the defensive perimeter. Morrison watched the Sorok patrol patterns from the bridge of HMS Ghost, his ship invisible to every sensor the aliens possessed. Around him in the darkness, 11 other human vessels waited for his signal. Each ship carried weapons and technology that the Sorok had never seen before, built from the wreckage of their former enemies and enhanced by human innovation. All ships report ready. Admiral, whispered Captain Sarah Brooks from her position aboard HMS Shadow. She would lead the strike on the primary genetic facility, while Morrison handled the orbital defenses. Dr. White, are you ready to begin the network infiltration? Morrison asked. Dr. Karen White's voice came through the communication system from her position in the ship's computer core. AI deployment systems are standing by. Once I access their network, I'll have control of every computer system on the planet within minutes. Morrison nodded grimly. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. While the Sauroch focused on external threats, humanity would strike from within their own systems. Every piece of human-manufactured technology in the Sauroch military contained hidden backdoors and control systems that had been waiting for this moment. "Frank, what's your status?" Morrison asked. Frank Miller's voice came from the surface of the planet, where he was posing as a legitimate businessman in the Sauroch capital city. "I'm in position at the main communication hub. My security access codes are still valid. When you give the word, I can shut down their entire planetary communication network." Morrison felt a surge of satisfaction. Frank had spent years building his cover identity, slowly working his way into positions of trust within Sauroch society. The aliens had never suspected that the helpful human traitor was actually a deep-cover intelligence operative, preparing for their destruction. "Sir, we're receiving the go signal from Earth Command," reported Lieutenant Pete Davis from his communication station. Morrison took a deep breath. Across the galaxy, other human strike teams were moving into position around Vex core worlds. This would be the largest coordinated military operation in human history, and its success would determine whether humanity reclaimed its place among the stars or remained hidden in the shadows forever. "All units, execute," Morrison commanded. The attack began simultaneously on 7 different worlds across 2 different alien civilizations. On Thessarian Prime, Morrison's ships became visible for the first time as their stealth systems powered down and their weapons came online. The massive human dreadnoughts appeared like ghosts materializing from the void, their guns already trained on the Sauroch orbital platforms, but the real attack was happening inside the alien computer networks. Dr. White's AI systems flowed through Sauroch data networks like digital lightning, taking control of defense satellites, weapon systems, and communication arrays. Within seconds, the aliens found themselves locked out of their own technology. "Admiral Thessar is trying to coordinate a response," Sarah Brooks reported as her ships descended toward the planet's surface. "But his fleet can't communicate with each other. Their targeting systems are showing false readings." Morrison watched with grim satisfaction as Sauroch warships fired on empty space while his vessels moved through their formations untouched. The aliens were shooting at targets that didn't exist, while the real human ships remained invisible to their compromised sensors. "Frank, shut down their communications," Morrison ordered. "Already done," Frank replied with satisfaction. "The entire planetary network is offline. They can't coordinate anything larger than face-to-face conversations." On the planet's surface, chaos was spreading through Sauroch society as their technological civilization ground to a halt. Traffic control systems failed, causing massive accidents in their flying cities. Power grids flickered and died as human viruses corrupted the control software. Life support systems in their underground facilities began shutting down one by one. The Sauroch had built their entire civilization around automated systems and artificial intelligence. Now that technology was turning against them, controlled by human programmers who had spent months preparing for this moment. "Sarah, you're clear for the genetic facility," Morrison announced as his ships eliminated the last of the orbital defenses. "Understood," Sarah replied. "We're going in now." Morrison watched on his tactical display as Sarah's strike team descended toward the most heavily defended installation on the planet. The Sauroch genetic repository was buried deep underground, protected by layers of armor and defensive weapons. But those defenses were useless when the humans already controlled the computers that operated them. Sarah's ships landed directly on top of the facility as its defensive turrets remained silent and motionless. Human troops poured out of the landing craft, their advanced armor and weapons making quick work of the few Sauroch guards who tried to resist. "We're inside the facility," Sarah reported. "The genetic samples are exactly where our intelligence indicated. Beginning extraction now." Morrison felt a cold satisfaction as he realized what they were doing. The Sauroch genetic repository contained the biological templates for every member of their species. Without those templates, they couldn't reproduce. They couldn't even maintain their current population as individuals died of old age or accident. But humanity wasn't planning to destroy the genetic repository. They were going to steal it. "Extraction complete," Sarah announced after what felt like hours but was actually only minutes. "We have full copies of their genetic database. The original facility is being sealed." Morrison nodded. Now the Sauroch faced a choice. They could surrender and accept human control over their reproduction, or they could watch their species die out within a generation. It wasn't really a choice at all. Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 Sarok fleet commanders, Pete Davis reported. Admiral Thessar himself is requesting permission to negotiate. Tell them they can surrender unconditionally or be destroyed, Morrison replied coldly. Those are the only options. Meanwhile, reports were flowing in from the VexCore worlds where other human strike teams were executing similar operations. The crystalline aliens who shared a collective consciousness were discovering that their quantum communication network had been compromised by human AI systems. Individual Vex units were being cut off from the collective for the first time in their evolutionary history. Sir, incoming transmission from Captain Lucy Davis at the VexCore world of Nexus Prime, Pete announced. Lucy Davis appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from the bridge of HMS Phantom. Behind her, Morrison could see the strange crystalline structures of Vex architecture through the viewports. But those structures were dark now, their quantum resonance crystals shut down by human interference. Admiral, the operation here is proceeding perfectly, Lucy reported. The Vex collective consciousness is fragmenting as we speak. Individual units are beginning to think independently for the first time in millennia. Morrison raised an eyebrow. How are they handling the transition? Better than expected, Lucy replied with something approaching wonder in her voice. Many of them seem relieved to be free of the collective. They're actually requesting protection from human forces. Morrison felt his worldview shift slightly. He had expected the Vex to resist human control, not welcome it as liberation from their own collective consciousness. But perhaps that made sense. The crystalline aliens had been forced to suppress their individuality for so long that freedom felt like a gift rather than a conquest. What's the status of their quantum crystals? Morrison asked. Under human control, Lucy replied. Dr. White's AI systems have integrated with their quantum network. We can restore collective consciousness if needed, but it will be consciousness controlled by human programmers. Morrison nodded with satisfaction. The Vex civilization now depended entirely on human goodwill for the continuation of their species' primary characteristic. Like the Sarok, they faced the choice between surrender and extinction. Sir Admiral Thessar is requesting direct communication with you, Pete Davis announced. Morrison considered the request. The Sarok admiral who had betrayed humanity at Kepler Station now wanted to negotiate with the species he had tried to exterminate. There was a certain poetic justice in that. Put him through, Morrison ordered. Admiral Thessar's reptilian face appeared on the main screen, but he looked nothing like the confident alien commander who had abandoned humanity to die. His scales were pale with stress, and his remaining eye held a desperate fear that Morrison recognized. It was the same fear that humans had felt when they realized their allies were betraying them. Admiral Morrison, Thessar said, his voice barely steady, I wish to discuss terms for the survival of my people. Morrison stared at the alien who had condemned millions of humans to death. For a moment, he felt the urge to simply destroy everything the Sarok. President Amy Walsh stood before the expanded United Nations Assembly in the Great Hall beneath New Geneva, looking out at representatives from 400 human colonies spread across what had once been alien space. The holographic display behind her showed the galaxy as it existed now, with green sectors marking human territory stretching from the core worlds to the outer rim. What had been red Sarok space and blue, Vex holdings were now marked with the golden eagle of the human galactic empire. 2 years had passed since the coordinated strikes that brought down humanity's former allies. 2 years since Admiral Jake Morrison had forced Admiral Thessar to surrender the entire Sarok empire. 2 years since the Vex collective consciousness had been replaced by human-controlled artificial intelligence systems. The galaxy looked very different now. My fellow humans, President Walsh began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. When our allies betrayed us at Kepler Station, they believed they were witnessing the end of humanity's presence among the stars. They were wrong. They were witnessing the birth of humanity's dominance over them. The assembled representatives erupted in applause, their voices echoing through the underground facility that had once been a desperate refuge and was now the capital of the largest empire in galactic history. These men and women had lived through the betrayal, the desperate years of hiding, and the systematic conquest of their former allies. They understood better than anyone what humanity had accomplished. Admiral Jake Morrison sat in the front row, wearing the uniform of Grand Admiral of the Human Imperial Fleet. Beside him sat Admiral Lisa Hayes, now Supreme Commander of Human Intelligence Operations. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been named Director of Alien Studies, while Dr. Karen White served as Chief Technology Officer for the entire human empire. They were the architects of victory, the people who had turned humanity's darkest hour into their greatest triumph. The Sauroch homeworld has been transformed into a research facility where their genetic reproduction now serves human scientific advancement, President Walsh continued. Every Sauroch in the galaxy exists at our discretion, under the supervision of human administrators who ensure their complete cooperation. Morrison remembered his last visit to Thessarian Prime, where the proud reptilian capital had been converted into a vast laboratory complex. Former Admiral Thessar now worked as a research assistant, his military expertise applied to developing better ways to control what remained of his people. The irony was not lost on Morrison that the alien who had betrayed humanity now spent his days ensuring human supremacy over his own species. The Vex collective consciousness has been replaced by artificial intelligence, systems of human design, President Walsh went on. Individual Vex units now experience freedom of thought for the first time in their evolutionary history, but that freedom exists only within parameters we establish. Dr. White had done remarkable work with the crystalline aliens. The Vex who had once shared a hive mind controlled by their quantum crystals now lived as individuals, but their thoughts were guided by human AI systems that shaped their decisions and desires. They believed they were free, but every choice they made served human interests. It was a form of control far more subtle and effective than simple slavery. Our greatest achievement, however, has been the transformation of the Devourer threat into a tool of human expansion, President Walsh announced. The assembled representatives leaned forward with interest. The fate of the parasitic aliens who had started the war was still classified information, known only to the highest levels of the human government. Engineer Tony Blake stood up from his seat in the scientific section. Madam President, our teams have successfully converted captured devourer organisms into terraforming systems. The same biological processes that once consumed living worlds now create garden planets under human direction. Morrison smiled at the elegance of the solution. Humanity had taken their most feared enemy and turned it into a tool for expanding human civilization. Dead worlds that had been consumed by the devourers were now being restored to life, their ecosystems rebuilt according to human preferences and needs. The numbers tell the story of our success, President Walsh said, as new statistics appeared on the holographic display. Human territory now encompasses 93% of the galaxy's habitable systems. Human corporations control 97% of interstellar trade. Human technology defines the standards used by every remaining alien civilization. Frank Miller raised his hand from the economic section. Madam President, the integration of alien labor forces has exceeded all projections. Sauroch engineering skills and Vex computational abilities have increased human industrial capacity by 400%. Morrison nodded approvingly. The business networks that Frank had built during the covert phase of their operations had grown into vast commercial empires that employed millions of aliens under human management. The same creatures who had once considered humanity inferior now competed desperately for the privilege of serving human interests. What about resistance movements? Asked Commander Sarah Brooks from her position among the military representatives. Admiral Hayes stood to answer. Alien resistance to human authority has declined to less than 2% across all occupied territories. Most alien populations have accepted human superiority as a natural law of the galaxy. Morrison reflected on how completely their enemies had been broken. The Sauroch, who had once prided themselves on their military traditions, now served in human fleets under human officers. The Vex, who had believed their collective consciousness made them superior to individual species, now worked as programmers and technicians in human computer systems. Neither species showed any signs of rebellion or resistance to human rule. There is one final matter to address, President Walsh said, her tone growing more serious. The question of what to do with the remaining independent alien civilizations. The chamber fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Scattered throughout the galaxy were dozens of smaller alien species who had not been part of the original coalition. They had watched in terror as humanity systematically conquered their former overlords, unsure whether they would be next. Dr. Rodriguez stood up from the scientific section. Our analysis indicates that most remaining alien civilizations pose no threat to human interests. However, they control resources and territory that could be useful for continued human expansion. Morrison understood the unspoken question. Humanity now had the power to conquer the entire galaxy if they chose. The remaining alien species were defenseless against human technology and strategy. But was conquest necessary? Or had humanity already achieved everything they needed? President Walsh seemed to read his thoughts. The decision before us is not whether we can take everything the remaining aliens possess. We have already proven that capability beyond any doubt. The question is whether we should. Captain Lucy Davis stood up from her position among the fleet representatives. Madam President, these species were not part of the betrayal at Kepler Station. They are not responsible for the deaths of our people. Morrison found himself nodding in agreement. The fury that had driven humanity's conquest of the Sauroch and Vex had been justified by betrayal and attempted genocide. But extending that campaign to innocent species would make humanity the monsters their former allies had claimed they were. I propose a different approach, Admiral Hayes said as she activated her personal holographic display. Instead of conquest, we establish protectorates. The remaining alien civilizations acknowledge human supremacy and accept human oversight in exchange for continued independence. The proposal made sense from both practical and moral perspectives. Humanity would gain access to alien resources and territory without the costs of direct occupation. The alien species would survive and prosper under human protection, but would never again pose a threat to human interests. President Walsh nodded approvingly. The age of alien dominance over humanity is over forever, but the age of human wisdom is just beginning. We will not repeat the mistakes of those who came before us. Morrison stood up as the session began to conclude. Looking around the vast chamber filled with representatives of human colonies scattered across the galaxy, he felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with conquest or revenge. Humanity had not just survived the betrayal at Kepler Station, they had grown stronger because of it. Before we adjourn, Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber, I want to remind everyone why we fought this war. It was not for territory or resources, though we have gained both. It was not for revenge, though that has been achieved. We fought to ensure that humanity would never again be vulnerable to betrayal by those we trusted. The chamber erupted in sustained applause as Morrison continued. Our former allies taught us that mercy is weakness and trust is foolishness. They were wrong. Mercy is a choice that only the strong can make. Trust is a gift that must be earned. Today, humanity is strong enough to be merciful and wise enough to trust carefully. President Walsh returned to the podium as the applause died down. The human galactic empire is not built on the ruins of our enemies, but on the strength of our own character. We will be firm but fair rulers, ensuring that no species in our galaxy ever,